This is a semantic difficulty merely. In a sense, one might say, strictly speaking, one thing never becomes another. I mean, this is why it's safer to stick to the phraseology which I did always use, or did also use, independence on A, B arises. I said originally, independence upon on an inanimate being, an animate being arises. If one speaks and understands the expression literally, in terms of an inanimate being becoming an animate being, then one lands oneself in all sorts of logical difficulties. It is not that this particular, that you have an individual amoeba, and that individual amoeba becomes an individual human being. Do you see what I mean? But what means that independence, upon the amoeba arises another creature which is a bit less like an amoeba and a little bit more like something else, and independence on that arises another form of life which is even less like the amoeba and even more like the something else. Neither the same nor different. And this process goes on and on and on and on, millions of years, and the end result is that independence upon what that amoeba, though not that individual amoeba in the literal sense, has become. You get a human being arising. But I think you have to envisage the process as being very much one in the course of which independence on A, B arises. Otherwise, you're as it were mentally thinking of an individual amoeba remaining the same amoeba, but somehow becoming a human being, while remaining an amoeba, which isn't the case at all. So it is basically a semantic difficulty. It is not that something which doesn't have life proceeds to develop in such a way that it, the same unchanging being that you started from, now has life instead of not having life. Is independence upon the being that doesn't have life, so to speak, that arises a being which does have life. If you think in terms of continuity in the absolute sense, or if you think in terms of non-continuity, discreteness in the absolute sense, you always encounter logical difficulties. It's more that we take conventions of speech to represent realities, which in fact they don't. They're only a sort of shorthand, which can't be taken literally. You might say, well, for instance, take another example. A good man becomes bad, but how can a good man be bad? Or how can a bad man be good? So when you say a good man becomes bad, or a bad man becomes good, you're sort of unconsciously thinking in terms of, say, that the bad man, while remaining a bad man, because afterwards he who becomes good, becomes good, which isn't the case. It's dependent on, the fact that of somebody's badness arises the fact of somebody's goodness. Not that the bad man in the literal sense becomes good, or the good man in the literal sense becomes bad. Otherwise you are confronted with the logical, either one or the other of two logical difficulties. Either that you've got two different persons, so one cannot become the other, or that you've got one person, in which case no change really takes place. So either the one doesn't become the other, or it cannot become the other. So better to stick to the formula, independence upon A, B arises. If one asks the question in the sense of asking, how does the one become the other? Well, no. Because it is in order to avoid speaking in terms of the one becoming the other, the one uses the expression independence upon A, B arises to signify the fact that there is neither complete continuity in the sense of no change, nor complete discontinuity in the sense of one completely different thing succeeding another. I'm only refusing to use the linguistic conventions which, when taken literally, give rise to the problem. Yeah? So I'm using, if you like, another linguistic convention, which we're not so familiar with, and which there is the less likelihood, therefore, of us taking literally, and which, therefore, is more able to communicate, the meaning here. It's almost like asking someone, "Have you stopped beating your mother?" And you say, "Well, I haven't started beating her." And then they say, "You're sidestepping the question." That's it. It requires reflection on this, because we're not used to thinking in that way. Independence on A, B arises. This whole question of sort of one thing becoming another, taken literally, is fraught with difficulties, fraught with logical absurdities. In traditional Buddhist language, there is a becoming, but there is no one or no thing that becomes. That's another way of looking at it. If you think in terms of something becoming another, well, yes, you land yourself in the logical difficulties of which I spoke. But if you speak just in terms of becoming, by which you mean, well, what does one mean? One means neither being not being, neither continuity of being, nor succession of being by not being, but something in between the two. If one thinks in terms of becoming, without anything that becomes, with an effort of imagination, you can probably avoid these sort of difficulties. We can say it's only really a question of how you put it, because we see the thing happening. We see, as it were, in a manner of speaking, one thing becoming another, or A arising independence on B, or B arising independence on A. We see, for instance, a bud, and then we see a flower. So the fact is unmistakable. But we just have to be careful how we describe it, because if we describe it in a certain way and take the description literally, then we land ourselves in logical difficulties. I see what you mean. You're just involved in the same semantic difficulty, that in order to manifest, it's got to already, in a sense, be there. But but that's, as it were, only in a manner of speaking. If you say that that a human being is potentially a Buddha, or a bud is potentially a flower, if you're not careful, you think somehow in terms of that the Buddha, as it were, lurking within the human being, the flower lurking within the bud, and when it becomes, when the human being becomes the Buddha, or the bud becomes the flower, it's a matter of the hidden Buddha, or the hidden flower sort of coming out, as it were, from inside and being revealed. But actually, it isn't like that at all. But if we take our conventional expressions literally, that's how we'll start thinking. So it is again a question of independence upon A, B arises.